Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. Now,
And
dig this. I have learned how to do a little waffle pattern on Fat Albert here. How cool is that?
now that is really great. Folks, take a screenshot of Fat Albert with a waffle pattern.
Yes, a lady at church was playing with one of my smaller cubes, and she just accidentally came across this pattern. Oh, that looks cool. So I'll have to figure out. I had to go home and figure out how to do it. That has nothing to do with the FAIRtax, but other than Fat Albert,
how much time you'll have once the FAIRtax is passed, yes. You'll have all kinds of time to get into special interests like Rubik's cubes.
Yeah, and again, the Fat Albert there represents the income tax, the complexity and the size of it, and the incomprehensibility of it. Most folks cannot solve Fat Albert if I scrambled it and gave it to them. So that's nobody can understand the income tax code in its entirety. But
can you imagine the weight lifted off of people's shoulders, physically, mentally? If the Internal Revenue Service was gone, Publication 19 could be, kindling for a fire in the backyard. And now here we are, very close to a substantive debate, I would hope, in the House of Representatives for H.R. 25.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, before we get going too deeply into there, let's see. I've got to bring this tab up on my computer.
Yes, it's time, ladies and gentlemen, for that moment on the FAIRtax Power Radio program where Bob P. delves into Congress.gov.
Yeah, the reason we do this is we show people just how insane our tax code is, some of the crazy stuff that's in it, and it's so we will start with S. Actually, let me do this first. Last time we looked, Congress is about a month old now. It's maybe about 5 or 6 weeks ago. There are 156 hits on the search Internal Revenue Code if you're looking for legislation in the current Congress. Go to congress.gov, put the Internal Revenue Code in quotes, hit the go button, and as of the day we're recording this, 156 hits on that search. A couple of weeks ago when we were recording, I think it was like 30-something. So it has just mushroomed in the past few days, and it'll be well over 2,000 by the time Congress is done with. But let's dig in here. The first one today is S 491. This is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to require that online contributions to a political organization require a credit verification value. I guess they want to know if you're going to send the politician money that your credit's any good.
They're just trying to build a credit reference on everybody in the country, and they can't do it the other way than through legislation, I guess.
All right, we'll try this one. This is S 464, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to deny the deduction for advertising and promotional expenses for tobacco products and electronic nicotine delivery systems. Now, tobacco products is something that you all there in North Carolina have a keen interest in, most of you.
Yes, and I think, a lot of folks that, became wealthy due to the tobacco industry, especially here in Winston-Salem. Brought Winston-Salem into great prosperity many, many years ago.
But now this bill, if it passes, is saying that if someone is advertising or promoting tobacco products or electronic nicotine delivery systems, I guess that's new vape things, electronic cigarette. If you're going to spend money advertising and promoting that stuff, we're not going to let you deduct that as a legitimate business expense. Now, advertising is indeed a legitimate business expense of just about every business that exists.
Yeah.
But they're gonna mess with the tax code to try to stop that. And again, whether using tobacco is a good idea or a bad idea, we're not getting into that. I'm just saying it's crazy that our tax code has to have that in it. And this one looks kind of familiar. This is HR 1044. If I'm not mistaken, this one was in the Hall of Shame last year, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to extend the exemption from the excise tax on alternative motorboat fuels sold as supplies for vessels or aircraft to include certain vessels serving only one coast. Yes, I did look that up. That was in the Hall of Shame last year. Now, I'm not saying that that is a shameful bill. Make sure that it's just crazy that stuff like that is in our tax code. So it's shameful that that has to be in the tax code, even though it may be a good idea. Although I know nothing about alternative motorboat fuel for vessels or aircraft serving only one coast.
Is that like the flux capacitor for the Back to the Future car? I think that's, doesn't that, I guess that might fit in. But here's to the sponsor of that bill for bringing it back right at the beginning of the year. And so it might make it into contention for the Hall of Shame. Check back with us in 11 months.
Okay, well, this is actually John Rutherford here in Florida introduced that bill. We'll move on. We've got to finish up our rest of the story series here. HR 1039. Now, see if you can figure this one out just by listening to it, okay? To amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to provide that certain bona fide residents of the Virgin Islands who are shareholders of corporations organized under the laws of the Virgin Islands are not treated as United States persons for purposes of determining certain inclusions in gross income with respect to such corporations. $50 if you could explain what I just said to you.
Hi, I'm Bob Scarborough. Welcome to
Oh,
kind of get my, but the whole idea is why does this have to be brought into the tax code? I don't see the parallel at all. It just might be an easy way to get the words in there that help satisfy a lobbyist for one of the representatives that put it in there.
Well, this was apparently Virgin Islands is kind of a territory, has got an at-large. I'm not sure it's a voting place, but the Virgin Islands does have an at-large representatives in the House of Representatives, and the Virgin Islands. See if I could. Stacey Plaskett, Plaskett, Virgin Islands at-large is sponsoring that bill. And we got one more, and this one just galls my gizzard every time I see it, because your income tax return is supposed to be private, right? HR 908, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to require the disclosure of tax returns of presidents and vice presidents and certain candidates for president and vice president, and your favorite phrase, for other purposes. Shall we put that one in the Hall of Shame too? Why not?
Let's go ahead and send it right on down there. We'll be talking about that one again. I mean, that's one of the main benefits of the fair tax and a move to a tax on consumption from a tax on income is your tax information should be completely private. And, they're going to hold that over as a political carrot to either party that might want to use it in a negative way. That looks like a can of cheer wine. It is
a can of cheer. You in North Carolina would recognize that. I'm not sure that anybody else will, but this is a cherry flavored soda. There's no alcohol in here, but it's really good. And I'm thirsty, so I'm getting some.
So there you go. Well, and it's right down the road from Winston-Salem.
That's made in Salisbury.
Yes, sir.
So,
yes, sir.
All right. Well, let's move on from Congress.gov to one other little quick item before we get into wrapping up our rest of the story series. And that is, it has just been announced that Americans for Fair Taxation has now impaneled a board of advisors, or an advisory board. Now, this is different from the governing board. This is advisory board. And we got some pretty cool names on this list. Do you want to go through it?
Yeah. Do you want to start at the end and go to the beginning, or do you want to start at the beginning and go to the end, or does it matter?
Your choice. I don't care.
Okay. Well, let's start, and not to displace, but I think we want to save the bigger name. And these folks have all benefited through the years with great knowledge about our tax system. We'll start with advisory board member Larry North. Welcome, Larry. Has a track record for fighting for fairness in our tax system. Until 2018, Larry was an advisor and managing director at Ryan LLC, one of the largest tax practices in the United States. Ryan's multidisciplinary team of more
And
than
then you
3,000
run out of room in mid sentence at dot, and it continues. So
serves
with
more than 18,000 clients in more than 60 countries, and in 2021 produced $2.5 billion in tax savings. Now, he's in Texas now, a great place to live. He lives in Dallas. He says he's honored to be on the advisory board of AFFT because he believes the fair tax will help all Americans promote production and savings, make our country more globally protective, and free us from reporting to the government every year and from the IRS. Doesn't say anything about for other purposes.
Okay. Also on the advisory board is a gentleman we've had here on Fairtax Power Radio before, David Kendall. That's the economics professor there at the University of Virginia. And he was the one that, with 80 of his colleagues, sent this letter to the Presidential Commission on Taxation back when several years ago, advocating for the fair tax. And we've had David Kendall on before, and we could very well have him on again, but he has also agreed to be on the advisory board. Now, let me get this next one, and then you can have the biggie. All right.
Okay. Well, I was going to let you have the chairman of the board.
No, I'm going to let you do the biggie, and I will mention that John Linder, who was the original sponsor of the fair tax way back in 1999, congressman from Georgia, has agreed to join the AFFT's advisory board. And so, in fact, he just wrote an article not long ago that Steve Hayes kind of reproduced in a chairman's report. And I'm working. I don't know if I can get him or not to appear with us here on Fairtax Power Radio. Well, I'm at least going to invite him to show up, and we can maybe talk with John Linder. So don't quote me on that night. That's just something I'm working on. Hopefully we can make that work. But anyway, John Linder is now on the advisory board, and now you may do the biggie.
Okay, very good. Very excited to announce the chairman of the Board of Advisors, Mike Huckabee. Mike from Arkansas served as governor from 96 to 2007. He learned about the fair tax in 2007 and endorsed it during his candidacy for the 2008 Republican Party presidential nomination. And he's been on Fox News. You've seen him everywhere since 2017. He's hosted a very successful show on TBN. He's been married for 49 years. They have 3 children and 7 grandchildren, and he's working hard to protect the legacy to make sure that they live in a nation where taxation is based on consumption. And Mike says he supports the fair tax because it helps people at the bottom of the economy, takes power from the politicians, gives it to we the people, and is simple and eliminates completely the Internal Revenue Service. So it's an honor for the entire organization, including us guys down here in the boiler room at Fairtax Power Radio, to welcome Mike Huckabee as chairman of the Board of Advisors for the Americans for Fair Taxation. And you can peruse the details on fairtax.org and click on the About button and then down to Board of Advisors, and you can read all about it. And while you're there, make sure you pop on over to the donate button and help us get some horsepower behind our messages. We're all volunteers. Bob's a volunteer. I'm a volunteer. All the folks that you see in and around. It takes a lot to run this organization, though. We'd love to have your support in that way.
Well, I'll tell you what, we need to keep going. We're about halfway through already. And for the past 4 Fairtax Power Radio episodes, we have been going through the rest of the story, stuff that was either being suppressed or distorted in the media about the fair tax. And we had one more thing that we needed to get a hold of that you are not going to hear in the media anywhere when you're hearing about the fair tax. And that is that the fair tax will ignite economic growth at a level, impossible with the income tax. Now, there has been broad general agreement for a long time among just about every economist out there that a consumption tax is better for the economy than an income tax. Of course, that's one of the things that we talked to Professor Kendall about, and he was just adamant. If you're looking strictly at the economics, a consumption tax is way, way, way better than an income tax.
Yes, sir. There have been a number of independent research studies done on the effect of replacing the income tax with a tax on consumption. They can get pretty wonky, but here are some of the key takeaways. All of the following were taken from an article entitled Research Summary of the impact of the fair tax on the economy. If you want to read the whole thing, you can open up the research tab at fairtax.org and click on economy under the research tab.
Yeah, there's a lot there. This is just one article under there. We're going to take some excerpts out of it and refer to a Beacon Hill Institute study. They concluded, now get this, that real GDP would be 8% higher in the first year following replacement of the income tax with a consumption tax. Now, under the income tax, if you get half of that, if you get 4%, you're doing really good. The Beacon Hill Institute says you get twice that, 8% higher in just the first year after you've replaced the income tax with a consumption tax.
And of course,
the fair tax is, and it goes up to 11% higher by year 5 and also 11% higher in year 10. Can you imagine? I cannot even imagine. I have
11.
Yeah, I have never seen double-digit GDP growth in my lifetime.
It was like rocket fuel. We always say it's like rocket fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same study concluded that job growth would be 12% higher in year 1, 12% for job growth, 10% higher in 5, and another 8% higher in year 10.
Yeah, and a lot of that is outsourced jobs coming back to the United States.
Right, exactly.
Oh, this next one will just blow your hat off. Investment, 75% higher in year 1, 86% higher in year 5, and 67% higher in year 10 following replacing the income tax with they say a consumption tax, of which the fair tax is a consumption tax. And again, this isn't
the only one that's on that floor of the House of Representatives as a bill right now. So
yeah, we're not pulling these numbers off the top of our head here. Go read that research summary, the impact of the fair tax on the economy, at the fairtax.org under the research tab, and you'll see all these numbers. You're there. What about wages?
Yeah, wages would be 10% higher in all 3 benchmarks that we just used in year 1, and then in year 5, and in year 10.
Oh,
wages,
now
10% raise immediately.
Yes. Okay. We've got a different study that used a dynamic supply side economics model. And I guess Professor Kendall will have to explain to us peons what that is. Yeah. But this second study predicted GDP would be 2.4% higher after 1 year. That's not quite as high as the first one. Right. That rises up to about the same level, 11.3%, actually a tick higher by the 10th year. So apparently that was just another, way to model this thing. And it said it would start off a little lower, but would end up at the same place, 11.3% GDP growth by the 10th year after you replace the income tax with the fair tax. Wow, that's
incredible.
That's mind blowing.
It's exciting to think that could happen, knowing that the studies have been done that say this is what will happen. This isn't just some sort of, well, we think this is going to happen. These are folks that are saying this is what will take place.
Indeed. Now, also, you hear something that you say, if you tax something, you get less of it. If we're going to tax consumption, what happens to consumption with the fair tax versus the income tax?
Well, since the numbers end up being, everything sort of levels out, all the tax money that's inside the ingredients that make a particular product, as it gets to the marketplace, would go away. Competition will drive all the embedded costs, tax costs out of the price. So you're going to end up paying essentially the same amount of money over the long haul for whatever you're buying, or and used items, of course, take no tax on them. Used car, used house, used clothes, etc. Well, the same study Bob just mentioned concluded that there would be an increase in consumption fueled by a 1.7% increase in disposable personal income.
Contrast that to what folks are saying. This thing is going to cost you 30% on everything you buy. Your personal disposable income is going to go way down with this thing. Not so.
You have to take a moment and dig through all of the rhetoric that is out there. The headline from many politicians, also some businesses, but you have to dig through to the details that are there. And this is why I think the research summary on the impact of the fair tax on the economy is a worthwhile read. probably right up there with publication 17 from the Internal Revenue Service.
Yeah, compare the
put them
two of them.
side by side, and that way you could say, okay, publication 17 or the FAIRtax. Which would you rather have? All right, consumption. Number G. You want to take that one?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Consumption would be 2.4% higher in the first year than it would be if the income tax stays in place. Consumption. So you're going to end up spending more. And by the 10th year, consumption would be 11.7% higher than it would have been with the income tax in place.
Now, people say, how is that going to happen? And the answer is an astounding amount. We've already referred to it, an astounding amount of economic growth. Economic growth. Your salary will go up. You know, you'll have more money in your pocket with a fair tax. And again, this is not just me and Bob Scarborough speculating off the top of our heads. This is a real live study that you can read.
That's right.
And there are a bunch more of them. And just go to the research tab under the main heading, main menu there at fairtax.org. Open that up. Go down to economy. We mentioned earlier that letter signed by 80 professional economists, including a Nobel Prize winner supporting the fair tax. That is there. The letter that Professor Kendall circulated earlier. It's all there at fairtax.org. And it's just nothing that's the media. It's going to tell you none of this. The media.
Can I add one more thing in? And are we going to go through the 10th year of the disposable income thing? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, by the 10th year, after passage and implementation of the fair tax, disposable income would be up 11.8% over where it would have been with the income tax still in place a decade after we didn't make it. And the thing about it is, for me, and this is big, because you hear a lot of people say, well, the first-time home buyers are really kind of out in the dark. They're not really going to be able to buy a new home. It's rent, or you're going to have to buy a smaller home and that kind of thing. Consider the opportunities that young people will have to begin to build wealth by saving their money tax-free in savings instruments that may not even be around today. I think that whole IRA and IRAs that protect you against taxation until later in when you take the money out, I think you're going to end up finding that you're going to have a lot more opportunity to save, and the encouragement is definitely going to be there with the fair tax. And those folks that are thinking, well, God, I don't know that I'm going to be able to buy a home or buy it until I'm 50, and then but I think young people need to be encouraged and look at what a tax on consumption would do to your potential through the act of saving money, instead of it going out the door first to the federal government and then into your pocket.
Yes, well, again, the economic growth that the fair tax is going to light off, and again, that's just not us talking. Those are learned economists who have studied the measure intently.
Yes,
this is what they're saying, that the economic growth is just going to be something that's unimaginable with the income tax, and so this is going to kind of wrap up our rest of the story. We thought it might take 2, maybe 3 episodes to go through all this stuff that the media is not telling you, and we ended up doing 5. So if you'd like to go back and check it all out, you can go to the archive on the FAIRtax Guys YouTube channel under live there and check out the entire thing. But just to recap some of the most important points that the media is not telling you. All you're going to hear in the media is this 30%. Thing is this is a nesting plan to put a 30% tax on everything you buy. They will not tell you that it replaces the income tax.
The working poor are going to be impacted greatly, and we know that is not the case.
They won't tell you that this huge 30% tax means no more withholding from your paycheck, no more federal payroll taxes from your paycheck. Plus, you get tax refund, the prebate every month. You'll never have to file a tax return again. Your personal finances become none of the government's business. None of that is going to be reported in the media when they're talking about the fair tax.
And seniors won't be punished unfairly, which is something that I've seen a few places.
Yeah, you were talking about that. A lot of seniors, I mean, everybody, seniors included, pays the embedded cost of and when you tax a business, All you've done is raise the cost of doing business. When the cost of doing business goes up, prices go up for everyone who consumes their products and services. And so that's just
we just had a minimum 15% tax on corporations brought into law here recently. So I want everybody to think about that and look and see what happens to your prices inside of the fluctuating inflation rates right now that bring prices up anyway, and think about what the corporations are going to do with that 15% minimum. That means that they're going to be passing that on in the cost of whatever they sell, service or goods throughout the next year, because they're going to end up paying in 2024 15% minimum. We just saw that go into effect.
So the voices you hear that I've heard the FAIRtax characterized as an attack on retirement savings. Seniors have saved all their lives, and now you're going to tax them again when you take out and they spend their money. Well, they're being taxed again when they spend their money already. They won't tell you that, which is crazy. Again, they'll keep hanging on the 30% rate, which is the exclusive way to express it. Again, the FAIRtax is going to be included in the price of everything you buy, not added on at the cash register. And if you buy something for $100, your receipt will say 23 of it was FAIRtax, 77 of it the store kept. So if you look at your $23 in tax as a percentage of the total you spent, the $100, it's a 23% rate. But they're getting that 30% rate by saying, wait a minute, you're adding $23 worth of tax onto a $77 item. That's 30%. So
and again,
that's where that's coming from, and that's where they're just going to keep hitting on.
It's the headline. You have to dig below the headlines. You're going to see all the fluff and all the smoke and everything else at the top in a 4-sentence or 2-sentence spill. But then you have to dig below that and say, well, I wonder if that's the right thing. Go to fairtax.org, check out the website. All the information is right there that you'll need. And I think you'll do well to share that with your friends as well.
And when they're talking about the FAIRtax rate, they will never explain how the prebate brings it way down. If you look at your out-of-pocket tax expenses versus your total spending, I mean, unless you're Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, you're not going to pay anywhere near 30%. A middle-class family spending $100,000 a year, we figured it out, 13.9% tax rate for them. Also, it'll reduce tax evasion dramatically. So I say we don't have time here to go through everything that we've gone through in the past 5 episodes. So hopefully you can go back to the archive and check that out. But we're going to start a new series here on FAIRtax Power Radio starting next week. The FAIRtax is good for, various demographic groups, socioeconomic groups. And we're going to start off by talking, those of you may remember, we talked to an attorney named John Richardson. He helps American citizens living outside the country deal with the unique problems that group of people have to deal with that the income tax code imposes on them. So we're going to talk with John about how the FAIRtax is good for expatriates, and then we'll move on to others as we continue on this series. And again, we appreciate you watching, listening, sharing the videos with your family and friends. That's going to wrap up this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Thank you again so much for watching and listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So tell me, how could I pay less taxes?
Less?
Yeah, I'm trying to get ahead, so how can I pay less?
Well, I suppose you could pay less taxes by earning less money, or you could give to charity.
How is that going to help?
Actually, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but if you know the right people, okay, or if you have a really good lawyer, you can usually get around the big ones.
If I may, under the FAIRtax, to pay less taxes, you would simply consume less. You would control how much you pay and when you pay your taxes simply by choosing what you purchase and when you purchase something.
So I could